Well, hey, I want to thank everybody for joining. Super excited. I just started developer relations or developer advocate with Angie at Apple Tools back in December, and I thought it would be great to get everybody together. And we have a great group of community leaders here. I'm super excited to get started and talk with all of you. So I think the first thing, if we want to just kind of go around and everybody introduce themselves, I'll kind of point out who to go. I'll just use the order that I see in my app. So, Angie, if you want to start with you, if you want to just kind of tell us who you are and what you're working on right now.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So glad that you all are here on a Friday. Um, yeah, so I am the Senior Director of Developer Relations at Apple Tools. Been doing DevRel officially for a couple of years and unofficially for more years prior to that.
Awesome. Sarah, you want to go next?
Sure. I just left a job, actually. I was VP of Developer Experience at Netlify. So I managed some nice people who might be on the call right now, like Jason Langsdorf and Cassidy Williams and Ben Hong and Kenny Ekene and tons and tons of other people. And we had 3 different groups in that. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Awesome. How about you, Emily?
Hey, so I also am fun employed at the moment. One more day. I just left a role at Microsoft as a principal cloud advocate, and then Monday I start my new gig. So I'm very excited. But I've been in DevRel for a while. I'm obviously extremely passionate about making sure developers have the best tools and ideas they can possibly have.
Awesome, and congrats on the job.
Thank you.
James, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. First off, to my employer, I am not leaving and have not left. So just want to confirm that I'm still in where I am.
Did we lose you there? Can anyone else hear him, or is it just me who can't hear him?
No, I can't hear James.
Okay. Maybe we can come back. Kelsey, you want to go?
Hey, Kelsey Hightower, sometimes known as this Kubernetes guy, but just someone trying to take a human approach to technology.
Awesome. James, do we have you back here?
Yes. I don't know what I did, so I apologize.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, I actually started my career out as a developer evangelist at Microsoft and then did software development for a few years and have been a developer advocate at Auth0 for a little over a year now.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. So throughout, I'm going to try to ask some questions. I'll also try to get some guests to see if you want to ask some questions. But generally speaking, we'll just kind of try to keep an open conversation and keep it a bit casual. So I think the first thing that I want to start off with is kind of what is developer advocacy? Because I know from my experience, kind of going around through talking to different companies, some see it as straight content, some see it as really heavy developer. I'd like to hear what you all think about what that looks like, and anybody feel free to jump in.
I feel like what isn't developer advocacy? So yeah, I mean, every day is so different. And I mean, the main focus is always connecting companies and their products with the developer community. So that can vary obviously pretty widely, but it really is that sort of interface. And I always like to say I'm a human router, making sure that developers have what they need from the company and their products, and that the company understands where the developer community is headed so that they can kind of clip their roadmap to that.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Emily. And at Netlify, what we did was we had developer experience, and there were 3 teams under developer experience. One was kind of, called the DX team, and it was more traditional advocacy, but it also still had heavy engineering. So did projects of engineering on its own, like created learning platform. We created a learning platform. We created a bevy of build plugins. So we were like ultimate dog fooders for all of the stuff that came out. We would build the actual extensions with them. And then there was a team called the integrations team that would actually build on top of the platform and make sure there were no gaps between the platform and different JavaScript frameworks. So that was 100% engineering. And then there was also a documentation team. And so basically the kind of space we were in was, many different prongs of understanding the developer's experience and trying to make that, process feel as smooth as humanly possible from all different aspects.
Yeah, I like to separate it between people who are developer advocates and the things that they can do. A lot of developer advocates can write code, they can engineer, they can give talks. But I think the idea of advocacy is something that can be practiced by almost anyone. If you build something and you want people to use it, then there's a whole bunch of activities that goes into that. So I don't look at it as necessarily as a department or a specific role, but definitely something that you should consider doing if you're hoping that that part of your customer base will be able to adopt it.
I've always kind of had one thing that's top of mind for me in DevRel is just first and foremost being a genuine member of community. And I think like all the details after that and how you execute on that will follow. But as long as you're like really investing in the people around you and building those relationships, then even if it's not like company or product focus, then when people have a question about a company or product and they trust you and you have relationships with them, then you can help them be successful in whatever they're doing. So my thing first and foremost is just always being a real true member of the community.
Yeah, and you actually.
Yeah, I would totally. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I often say the way that I approach this is I work for the community. Like the community is my employer, and my company sponsors that initiative by paying my salary, of course. But I think very much so community first. Never like approaching this as I'm trying to sell the community something or anything like that. Is very much so from an engineer's mindset, like, wow, this is a cool solution. What problems does it actually solve? So getting rid of all of the marketing buzzwords and all of that stuff, what does this solve for my community? And if it solves a genuine problem and I find it interesting, then I naturally want to share that with my community. Also, in making sure that internally we're building things that solve real engineering problems, right? So providing feedback, I like to think of myself as like an in-house customer. And I represent the engineering community internally. So providing feedback on how it can be better or creating tools. So Sarah's really good at that. I'm fangirling a bit. So Sarah and Kelsey are my books, right? If you were to think of like studying DevRel, they are my books. They are the people that I study. And I've learned a lot from them. One of which is Sarah's always like just generating these developer tools, right? And a lot of times it has nothing to do with her job at Netlify, but she sees like, wouldn't it be nice if we had like an easy way to create CSS grids? Let me make a tool for my community kind of vibe. And that's the heart of a developer advocate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think actually you touched on an amazing thing there, and I think James did too. One of the things is the community and having like a lot of empathy for where people are coming from. That's what makes any of those tools or any of the things that you're talking about or any of the things that you're speaking about or whatever you're creating so important. And James also used the word trust, and I think trust is a really big piece of this too, because a good developer advocate really thinks through what are the best pieces of this? What are the things that really connect people? And then actually there's a piece of advocacy that's not external, that's going internal and fixing the stuff that isn't, correct or right or not working quite well, and doing internal dog fooding so that something can come to the community and be a little bit more, honest and stuff. And I think that, there was that old thing that said you gain trust in drops and you lose it in buckets. And I think that that's really true with community, especially in the dev community. If they see people who aren't like really speaking to the thing that really is the thing that's catching them, then that doesn't resonate as much as somebody who's really engaged and going, no, we've got this thing that's going to really help you out. And then I think when those things happen together, then you're serving the company, but also the community, and that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, so it sounds like the community is a large part of it. And Angie, I really like your take about the in-house customer. But so like a theme that I'm seeing is a lot of like development. Do you all think that somebody has to be a developer to be a developer advocate?
If I were to jump in, I would say this is where I have my biggest conflict. As much as we want to be engineers and developers first, there is a huge marketing overtone. And part of that marketing overtone, if you worked at a company that has lots of products, they're going to want the same type of attention across those products, right? And one thing I think having an engineer in those roles, you bring a bit of authenticity. It's like when a company goes out and tries to get an endorsement from someone people already respect, then you can kind of attach the product or service to that and maintain some level of authenticity, especially if that person uses that tool. But the struggle for me, though, is that a lot of times when you're working with a lot of other people, they may want to use that in the form of a blog post to promote some other product, or maybe you are engaged with the community, but they would really, really like you to mention a product or service during that talk or around it. So I think there's a lot of work to balance out the needs of the company that writes the check, and then your authenticity and how you want to engage and represent the people you identify with.
I would argue that it benefits anyone in DevRel to have been an engineer at some point in their career. I would never, when I give advice to people, obviously I focus a lot on code schools because I come out of a code school. And when people are like, I'm really interested in DevRel, I always say, I think that's fantastic. And I hope that you keep that interest. But I feel that in order to have real empathy for the larger developer community, you have to really kind of identify with the daily problems that they come across.
The technical aspect of DevRel is really interesting. And Emily, like I mentioned, I started my career out as a developer technical evangelist at Microsoft. The really interesting thing there was like all of a sudden having basically no speaking experience and really no technical experience, I was thrown into like the line of fire of giving presentations and being in rooms of developers that have been literally writing code for longer than I had been alive. And I remember like a couple of instances of like me seeing a bit of code syntax and like acknowledging I don't know what that is, and then my mentor later on being like, don't ever acknowledge that in front of people, which I don't think is the best advice. Like I'm totally comfortable saying I don't know now, but it was this really interesting thing of still being able to do that job. And I would say for what I did it well, but my biggest gap at that point was not having the technical experience. And that's why my next role, being a full software development role and doing that full time every single day, I think makes me a totally different developer advocate now for those same reasons that you just mentioned, like understanding developers, being empathetic, but also just understanding more about how to write code and going back to trust, like having, I don't know if this is the best phrase, but like having been in the trenches, right? Like having done the jobs that I know other people are doing, I can relate more, I can demo more, I can hopefully just do a better job overall as an advocate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, especially because you have to be able to understand where people are coming from in terms of how they're using the thing. Not even just like so that you don't, there's the aspect of like so that you don't look like you don't know things, but I think one of the bigger things is the product that you're talking about or you're trying to show people, you actually have to understand a bit how it's going to be used in context. And I think there are people who can pick that up rather quickly. So I don't want to say that you can't do that as like a younger dev, but you do have to be, there's definitely a lot of interest in the developer space that you have to have, and that empathy piece is pretty huge. At Netlify, what we tried to do is a product engineering rotation so that people on the developer advocacy staff would go to product engineering for a few months of the year, and that way they would get to know the system, but also like Netlify is built with Netlify, so they get some experience working with that. It's not like it was a perfect thing, like you did that and then you're perfect at everything, or or like it was a perfect experience for everyone. But I do think that there was some value in being able to move across the table, understand how different parts of the org are working, and kind of strengthening that relationship. And strengthening that relationship came in handy for other things, like when we would dog food and find problems, we knew who to talk to, where to go, had good relationships there. So it is relationship building, both internal and external, which I think is, to go back to the earlier premise of like whether or not you need to be a developer, you do a bit to have some of those relationships and build them with people.
Yeah, and it seems like with the empathy and generally kind of knowing a little bit what you're doing, Angie, I heard on one of your podcasts in the past, from the Ladybug podcast, you talked about how you felt like you were a teacher in your past life, and you don't want to try to sound smart, but you want to try to break things down to its simplest and really try to relate to the people that you're teaching. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
I think that's probably one of my strongest assets, is being able to break things down, and like removing ego and stuff from everything, right? This is a tough field. And we often get caught up in wanting to impress people and look really smart and sound really smart. And sometimes that's at the expense of the person actually being able to digest whatever you're talking about. So you have to ask yourself, what is my goal here? Do I want to sound smart, or do I truly want to help someone? And my goal is always to truly help someone. And in that, I break it down to its simplest terms. And guess what? People think I'm brilliant for being able to do that. So I come off as sounding smart anyway, because I help them feel smart. And if you can help someone else feel smart, you're naturally smart. You're just going to be smart by default because you help someone else be smart. So that's how I approach a lot of things. I I I haven't taken like any training or whatever in teaching, but I've taught as like an adjunct professor. And it's funny, I look at back over my career and how things like that have helped influence how I approach developer advocacy or developer relations. So using like those teacher skills to be able to break down like tech concepts to professional engineers has been very helpful. And to touch a little bit on the previous question, I draw a lot from my experience as a developer. So I was a developer for several years, maybe like 15 years before going into developer relations. And I draw on that a lot when being able to empathize with other developers and be able to see like where they're coming from, or to be able to tell R&D like, no one's going to use it like that. This is how we should create it. Like all of that comes from my experience, but I also don't want to be a gatekeeper, right? So I've been struggling trying to think like, how can newer engineers get into this space, because it shouldn't just be all seniors, right? A junior engineer may be able to learn better from a junior engineer. There's some things that I take for granted, like when I taught my Java course, right? And I thought I broke that thing all the way down. I was like, anybody off the streets can come and take this course and they'll be able to learn Java. And I gave it to someone with no tech experience, and realized so many things that I was taking for granted that people know, like how to install something, right? How to navigate like the file directory and things like that. And I find that newer engineers, that stuff is at the forefront of their brain, is very fresh for them because they just learned how to do that stuff. So they remember to include those types of steps that can help others. So I think that it shouldn't be something that's like just for senior developers, but we also shouldn't throw a junior developer out there by themselves and tell them to like run a DevRel program or something like that. So in cases like those, I would recommend like um, putting them under a senior person and, allowing them to mentor and guide them on that.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like my past dev experience has helped me with content creation and such because I've been in the struggle and the pain to realize how to explain something. But I like the thought about how to introduce people into that. And I know a lot of teams are starting to produce ambassador programs. And James, I know Auth0 is one of those. And you also literally have a community that you created, the Learn, Build, Teach. How do you think that that ambassador program, as well as that community, kind of helps gear people and push people to help them towards that kind of path?
Well, I hope my manager is listening for the plug for the ambassador program, since he did a lot of that work. Shout out to Sam Julene on our team, who really not started from scratch, but really took our ambassador program to the next level this year. One of our main goals, like going back to being genuine members of community for people, like selfishly, we get the benefit, right, of like scaled messaging. Like if we have people that we trust that can help represent us, that's that many more people that can get exposed to Auth0 and hopefully in a good light, right? But there's the genuine member of community aspect is we really want this program to be the kind of thing that can provide some of that training. So that, to everyone's point, like I think the technical skills definitely do help. So it's not, but that doesn't mean that you can't also be building the content skills and the speaking skills as you're also learning engineering or whatever it is that you're doing. So from our perspective, we want to do things like have some semi-informal trainings with each other. Like I did a session with our ambassadors a few months ago on just like an intro to streaming and the different tools and things that I use in that sense. We've got some different workshops and things planned out this year. But we want to be that resource. Like as we create content every day, as we speak at conferences and things like this, we want to be able to share tips and tricks and skills, and then also give them opportunities to do that as well. So one of the additional things we're doing is through some of our YouTube videos coming up probably in the next couple of months, we'll have some ambassadors recording some of those videos, so they'll be able to be kind of highlighted on our YouTube channel and the content that they create as an opportunity to continue to do more and more of that stuff. And for some of them, their goal is to get into DevRel. Some of them it's not. But especially for people who have those goals, we want to help facilitate and add as much resources and help behind that as we can.
It's so cool that you're doing that, because it really like engages the community in such a personal way, because they, gives them opportunity to make things of their own and break in. I think Angie does this amazing thing with Applitools University, which I think is like an unparalleled effort, where the test automation AU, the thing that she built, she allows people to kind of build all of these courses on her platform. She of course built all of these courses on her platform, and it's just an incredible thing to see, because it's not only is it free courses for the community, it's got the whole community making courses too. So you can start to see how people are just teaching each other. And I just thought that was such an amazing effort from Angie.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, it's amazing what she's put together with that program. But so further away from like a literal community like Jamesville, but like actually reaching out to the community as a whole. Like it seems more than just kind of developer, it's also kind of helping people, inspiring, mentoring people, and helping them with their problems. So how do you see that with things like providing motivation, promoting diversity and inclusion, and just generally building outwards for other communities?
I generally separate that from the work. This is the first developer relations org I've ever been in, but I think I've been doing some form of developer or relating to developers in some way my entire career. But when it comes to like the pure human part of it, regardless of the thing I'm trying to help them with, maybe the product doesn't touch them, or maybe it's not even relative to them, I think there's still a human connection that's independent of work, that follows me no matter what I'm working on, who I'm working with. So for me, I try to keep that part a little separate. I do like being in communities where they incorporate some of that stuff, but I tend to separate it because I don't, just to be transparent, honest, I don't expect most companies to really prioritize those things over the product itself, just to be realistic. So this is why I try to make it a personal commitment to engage in those kind of human well-being things as just as a person and also the people around me. So if that impacts the organization, bonus points. If that impacts the community, bonus points. But I've learned just through my career that it doesn't turn out well to expect the whole business to prioritize those things over product adoption and product growth.
That's really interesting. It's such a like realist perspective, right? Like sometimes we get caught up in this Twitter world, which is not the real world. And on Twitter, like we're all like social justice warriors and are expecting like companies to follow suit when that's just not the reality of it, right? At the end of the day, they're in this to sell products. And while those things are definitely important, we have to also be realistic in, these efforts.
Yeah, I've seen people who are learning Kubernetes and they go get promoted and they make more money. That's good for business, but I also look at that person that writes you that follow-up email. I'm pretty sure lots of people on this call have gotten that follow-up email to say, hey, that skill that I obtained through your workshop, your video, your course, I was able to go get paid from that. And the thing that makes me more interesting is what happens after that, right? They can go take care of their family. They can go solve some of those problems where maybe financial or money is the solution to that particular thing. That's where I just kind of make space for it, because after the sale is done, I still want a relationship with that person.
That's fair. I think part of this is it falls under what I would call the community manager aspect of advocacy or developer relations, because most of us are at least visible or leaders in our community. I feel that we do have a responsibility to curate a culture in that community and make sure that we're modeling what we believe are the ideals of that, and kind of what I think of as sort of sneaking it in. So giving companies opportunities to do the right thing, whether they are incentivized to do it or not. And so like we advocate for things like transcription for conferences, or it can be very small little wins throughout the whole job.
So my question for you, is it the company doing that or is it you? Because I've seen, people like you that play a really important role where when you're in charge or you get to make that decision, there's a certain outcome. And then maybe a person like you switches roles or does something else. And maybe some other person who is in that role, that's not a priority for them. And then that tends to slip away in that community. How much of this is really, or in your opinion, maybe down to the person who's at the helm in that position versus the organization?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And at any point, you're going to have, a person's priorities are going to be reflected in their role. But I think by modeling it and setting expectations so that the company is just used to that type of thing, like, I've talked about with some people on this call about just, kicking down doors. And it's part of it is creating a pattern, a groove, so that when someone else steps into the role, they don't have to fight that fight. They have a little bit easier of a path if that is a priority for them. And I hope it would be.
Yeah, and I think you can instill those values on a team too, so that everyone on the team kind of knows it's a safe place to speak up about things, and create some vulnerability within both the leadership team and the group that you're in. I think it's also a good reason why people in developer relations and this kind of space should be at leadership tables. I found it really important to be at a VP level, because there are some things that you kind of understand or know more from talking to the community every day and being involved in that are extraordinarily helpful for people who might get a little bit detached from that at that level. And so I think, Kelsey, to your point, absolutely, it's like you do that advocacy personally, but I think that if you do it enough in enough places, and also if you hire well with people on your staff that also share some of those same values, that it's going to kind of continue from there.
Cool. And so, Angie, I heard that you brought up about the Twitter sphere and being like social warriors and such. And I think, how do you think how do you all think that social media kind of plays in a role of developer advocacy? Like, do you think you need a big audience? Do you need to be extroverted and tweeting all the time? How does it kind of play off with the whole quote influencer kind of role?
I'm pretty sure some people think we sit on our couch all day eating bonbons, drinking champagne, and tweeting.
You don't?
I would,
Do we not?
I will say that tweeting is a regular outlet for me. But no, I think, I mean, it varies, right? It's going to vary person to person based on the mediums in which they best connect with their audience. And so for obviously, most of the people on this call have a pretty high following. I honestly still don't understand why. So if anyone has ideas, I would love to know. But I think, if you connect via Twitter, cool. I do not believe in hiring people based on Twitter follower count. I don't think that should really count for anything. I don't think it's indicative of any particular quality other than just being pithy. So, when you're hiring or when you're thinking about building out a team or being a developer advocate, you have to find the avenue that you best thrive in. So maybe that's on stage, maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's blogs, videos. It can be anything, so just kind of find your space and then lean into that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and to that point, there's even if we're talking about the dog fooding part, there are parts that are internal too. So you can have advocates who are not really on social planes and things and doing engineering work. Like we had folks who are doing 100% engineering work because they were making the product better based on that, community feedback that others were gathering. So I think there are different aspects of the role, and you could be hybrid of these types of things, like where you're doing some engineering work and some outward speaking, and you can be 100% outward speaking. You could be the one on the ground who's taking that feedback and running with it and making sure you're connecting the dots internally. So there's a lot of different avenues in this advocacy area.
I think for me, what's more important about Twitter and these social platforms is me listening and consuming what's going on. So this is where I am able to, get my pulse on what's going on in the engineering community, right? Without that, anything that I suggest would just be based on my opinion or my experiences, but being able to hear from, a large variety of other engineers, not always talking at them or to them, but listening to what they're saying and what their issues are and their problem areas helps me a lot.
I look at it as a tremendous superpower. I do remember a time where there were many gates into who gets to talk about what and when and to who. And I think these social media platforms, number one, I met someone, I remember the first time someone stopped me and said, "Could I take a picture?" I'm not Tom Cruise, I'm not a famous person. But you realize that there are people who want to support what you're doing. And these social media platforms has been a way, for me at least, to keep some type of connection with them, dialogue, learn from them, share my thoughts in general. And I think when that became something that was available to pretty much everyone, it's democratized, we now have a platform, right? So I remember I've worked at companies where you couldn't write on the official blog. That was only for VPs and senior directors. You don't get your post there. You go do that on Medium. And then what I've seen change is that now our audiences may not trust the corporate blog as much. They want to go see what your authentic opinion is, maybe with less filters. And I think what social media can do is no guarantee, but I've seen social media give us that platform to kind of be ourselves in the way we choose and see that grow its following. So sometimes I'll look at the numbers and you're right, they could be vanity metrics. They don't guarantee anything. But I do think when those things are real and you see a lot of people having great engagement on those platforms, it really does speak to the volumes of how that person has been able to engage and also the connections they've been able to build as themselves.
I also just wanted to add, Twitter is unique in that I mean, this kitchen gets hot. It turns into crisis communications pretty quickly. And so if Twitter is something that stresses you out or you don't feel comfortable sharing or, whatever, like it is not anything mandatory. And I never want someone to feel like they have to be something other than themselves on Twitter or perform in some way.
I think overall it's just amazing how many opportunities we have. And this is especially true during COVID, right? Like so many difficult situations for so many people, but it's also been really interesting to see how creative people, especially in our industry, have gotten with making connections. And I've done a live stream on Fridays, every Friday for the last like 6 months or something. And literally every person, or 90% of the people that I've brought on, are people I've never met before. Like I've never even had a Zoom call with. I've never talked to before outside of a back and forth on Twitter. And I see people do something cool or post something interesting on Twitter. I'm like, hey, like, would you be interested in coming to talk about that with me on stream? And so it's cool that like live streaming has become more popular, more accessible, more people are doing it. It's an interesting way to make connections with people and learn more about them than just like a pre-recorded video on YouTube, right? Because I think going back, Kelsey, to your situation where someone asked to take a picture with you, like because you're on videos and at conferences, people have this like celebrity mentality and they watch a YouTube video and they think that you're perfect and your code is so amazing, and it really most of the time couldn't be further from the truth. So live streaming in particular is one of those interesting ones where you get to see real people for who they are and what their skills are, and you can kind of collaborate with them and debug things together. It's really fascinating. So it's just interesting. Obviously we've been in a virtual world for a long time, but especially in the last year, how many different relationship building opportunities or connection building opportunities there are, including what we're doing right now, right? Like this is a new thing that wasn't there. I don't know when it came out, a couple months ago, right? So you're seeing more and more of these opportunities to connect. And I think with all of them, it's whatever works for you, wherever you find the most connections, wherever you enjoy spending your time. It probably for most people, it's just a combination of several different places.
Emily made a really strong point about being yourself. And I've seen some people that look at the number count and chase it. And sometimes they get popular by being the angry person, the person who shits on everything else someone is doing, or the person who has to pretend to be happy all the time. That's not sustainable. If you attempt to try to be someone else on social media, you might find that hard to maintain going forward. And I've seen a lot of people really burn themselves out by thinking that there's a quota of how many posts you have to have or how many likes you have to have. So if you can build that network as authentic as you can, I think that's going to be sustainable, because then it will just come natural to you.
I think that's really well put. I love all of the opportunities that Twitter has given all of us, and to be here right now. And I wouldn't know some of you if I didn't have Twitter, which it makes it totally worth it for me because there's so many people in this call and in my life right now that I really appreciate. But it does have a double-edged sword for sure, especially at scale. So I think it's probably worth like being fairly honest about that. That like there's these wonderful, beautiful aspects of it where you get to travel and you get to meet all these wonderful people and make these connections and share your work in a way that we could not before. Like absolutely those opportunities were not open to people like me before. And then there's also this other side where there's harassment sometimes and abuse sometimes, and there's things that happen at scale that feel really scary and challenging for pretty much everybody. So I think one of those things when you're talking, Kelsey, about chasing numbers, I just want to be really honest with folks that it's kind of a mixed bag. Like it's not like you do developer advocacy and then you step on a stage and everybody loves you forever and you're done. There are things to consider in that in terms of like how you engage and what you do that really impacts people, that have real consequences, but also like just the levity of the situation, because it used to be that you would say something at a company or something and it would be within the company. Here you're talking about a grandstand with like a megaphone for hundreds of thousands of people sometimes, and that can resonate with some people and not resonate with other people. So like I think there's a lot of good that comes out of that, in that we are all really actively learning from each other all the time. But I don't want to glamorize it too much, in that it's a challenge. It's a challenge to create content that resonates with a lot of people, but also resonates correctly with a lot of people, and listens adequately, like Angie was saying, listens to the environment that you're in, and takes in some of the harassment pieces and the parts that are a little bit more uncomfortable.
I hope we get to the whole "Are you a real developer?" part, because I remember giving a talk in the early days on Kubernetes when it first came out. Most people didn't know how to spell it, and probably still people can't spell it, but that's okay. I remember I was speaking at maybe Strange Loop or something like that, and I was giving this talk about this new distributed system and how it takes a lot of the theory and turns it into practice. And I remember most of the questions I got from the audience were just straight up, do you even understand how etcd works? Did you write that demo code yourself? Who wrote that demo for you, because it's really great? And you had to sit and to explain to people that at that time I had commit access to the Kubernetes repo while I was working at CoreOS. I built some of the core components or libraries that people are telling me about. And that part, I don't know where it comes from, but it's very weird that when someone can do things like public speaking or white whale or talk or empathize with humans, somehow their engineering credibility drops.
Ooh, now we up to the good
Yeah,
stuff.
100%.
Yeah, we can expand on that if anybody else wants to touch on it.
Yeah, we should.
Sarah, you want to? Because I know you have personal stories of this.
Well, yeah, I think what's interesting is, like Angie mentioned, that she's been working in the industry as a dev for 15 years before she was an advocate. I was too. And I feel like when I was working as an engineer, I would just put out things because I was like, oh, maybe I learned this thing, maybe that will help, XY person, or maybe it will help me later when I forget, because a lot of the resources I put out, I'm like, wait, what did I do again? Um, but what happened was, I was a dev for so long, and then people started following me, and then I got offered this advocacy job, and I thought that sounded really great, because I had been a teacher, and I'd made 10K a year as a teacher, and this was a job where I could do what I loved but still get paid. And then what I found was, as soon as I went into advocacy, people thought that I didn't know how to code, and that was just I'm going to be honest, that was such a bummer. Like, to go from doing all of this engineering stuff, and feeling like I was getting somewhere in terms of like understanding some pieces, and then watching my credibility drop because I could communicate. And I feel like this world that we live in, where communication is counter to engineering, is that's a pretty toxic concept, especially because when you think of some of the coding errors I've seen at scale, most of them come from communication problems, not from coding problems. I mean, definitely they come from coding problems too, but there's such an aspect of communication in coding that just feels wrong to me, and that's all I have to say.
It's funny because you do, like Kelsey, Sarah, I do, maybe Emily. I'm not sure. I haven't seen too many of Emily's talks, but like we do these demos live, like basically saying, "Bitch, I know how to do this, right? I know how to do this." And we're showing people, like, I'm talking to you and I'm coding at the same time. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, I'm that girl, right? And yet, people would then come up to you after and ask, like, who wrote your demo? Like, are you insane? Like, what do you mean, who wrote my demo? Did you not just see me kill it? So it's comical to me. I never really take it serious. I make them feel really small if they even question me, because I find it's ridiculous.
If you're a hip hop fan, this is like accusing a rapper of rhyming someone else's lyrics. Like it is it is kind of that personal when people kind of accuse you of, it's nothing wrong with recycling someone's demo, but at the same, this is why I always had trouble with the word evangelism, because I'm not preaching anything to you. The goal is to kind of, I call it learning in public and just sharing things that I know how much benefit it could bring. And so that's where I think this whole, is this person real or not? And maybe there are some examples where, it's hard to know who to trust, but it's definitely a strong topic.
This brings up like one of the conversations that I have with my current students a lot. I'm currently teaching a boot camp, which the core curriculum is wrapping up next week, which is really exciting. But these are mainly people who've never written any code before, and most people are trying to transition careers completely, right? Like getting their first job in tech, whatever that specific job may look like for individuals. And we talk a lot about like you as a person, even though you only have X number of months of programming experience, like you are a person and you have skills and you have strengths and you have experience, regardless of what that background is. You have things to bring to the table, and part of that is just like packaging it and being able to articulate that and explain it in interviews. And I bring that up because like basically we have an additional strength. Like in addition to engineering, we can communicate and we can talk and teach, and we enjoy that. But that's not any different than anyone else being a good athlete or being a musician or being an artist or anything else, right? Like it's just a set of skills that we're able to bring to this particular role and combine, I think, in a way that is ideal for all of us here. But we all have strengths, right? So it's not any different than any other skill that people may have. It doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive at all.
I just want to say that like someone else's wins aren't detracting from your success. I think so much like in this industry we're constantly comparing ourselves to each other, and like if someone is X, they can't be Y. But Kelsey phrased it so well. I mean, it's just we all have different skills and they're not mutually exclusive.
This particular topic is probably why I'm so torn about juniors being in this role. Like, I definitely want them here, but also, you think about people like us who are very senior, who work at like top companies. Like Kelsey, like works at Google. Emily was at Microsoft. James at Microsoft. Sarah Nettify. You know what I'm saying? Like you work at top companies. You put in your time, and yet people still question our talents. You have to be really strong in this role, I found. And I'm not sure if junior people would be set up for success, especially if they're out there by themselves, right? So you go out there, you only really know your topic. People start drilling you with questions just to kind of like put you in a gotcha situation. And you have to know how to handle that. You have to be able to stand on your own. And I'm not sure if it's fair to put newer folks in that sort of situation. What do y'all think about that?
I have, and I've tried to make sure everyone knew where their strengths were. For example, giving a workshop where you've had chance to really learn the content, you feel comfortable with it, you can get that syllabus, the Q&A, you know what the answer should be. That tends to make the person a little bit more confident. And then just let them know, don't try to act like you know it all. In many cases, you just happen to know a little bit more than the people in your presence on this one topic. Be ready for someone to ask you something a little bit out of scope, but also if you don't know, cool. This is a chance to figure out where you should go focus your learning so you can be prepared for that question in the future. And I think they'll develop over time. Where I see it go south, though, is like there's a big difference from a conference talk where you have the mic and a whiteboard session or a Q&A session where it's just any question can come up. And I think that's when we start to put people in a spot where if they're the only person sitting there having to answer all of these questions, especially that day 2, that day 3 kind of question, like how do you debug this in production? That's where I think we might be setting people up for a little bit more than they might be able to handle at that time. But there are so many people that are new that need that one-on-one content that I think developer relations is a good step on your journey, but you're right. There's no substitute for experience. And if you work at a place where you won't be able to get that experience, then you may have to think about stepping out of developer relations to go get that real world experience, and maybe you can come back.
Kelsey, when
that
you're
Yeah, that's
step,
a really
sorry.
sorry, I'm gonna say this one point, I'm gonna jump out. That's a really good point. There was a young lady I heard, and she gave a talk on machine learning. And she started the talk off by saying, look, I'm not a machine learning expert. I tried this one little project. That's what I'm about to tell y'all about. And it was just so refreshing, one, to see somebody on stage, not claiming to be an expert, but look, I'm going to just share my knowledge on this one thing that I know. And that kind of disarmed everyone. Otherwise, you're an ass if you try to attack her, right? She already said she wasn't an expert on this. And then it also gave us in the audience who didn't know much about it, like this perspective. Great, good. I don't want to hear from an expert because I'm not at that level. I want to hear from somebody who just learned it last week, or whatever. It might have been earlier than that. But, who's someone who just learned it and can share that perspective. Sorry, go ahead, Emily.
I completely agree with all of that. And jumping back, I think 2 comments. Angie, you were saying this is one of your fears with juniors being in developer relations, and that is completely accurate for me as well. And it's not that I feel like they can't handle it, it's that I'm afraid that their self-confidence will take a nosedive. Like, I remember early on in developer relations, I was at a conference. I was not very well known at that point, and I got essentially whiteboarded by the audience. I mean, it was just like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And I learned how to handle it and how to sort of facilitate those conversations. I've also learned a lot of times when someone's peppering you with those questions, it's often about jargon. They're talking about X and you're talking about like the same thing, but you're just calling it a different name or whatever. But I don't want people to get into it and then feel like, oh, I'm not actually a good engineer because these 2 guys will actually meet me at a conference. I also want to say, to Kelsey's point, I think stepping back into an engineering role is a really, really solid idea. But if we're being honest about career trajectories and money and titles, you are not at that point the same level of engineer as you were previously because you've been focused on other things. And that doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad engineer. It just means you've been focused on other things. And so I think sometimes stepping back into a full-time engineering role can feel like a step down or certainly a step sideways. And we have to figure out how to square that.
I was actually curious from all you folks, but like Kelsey had brought up that he was mentoring someone who was junior. When you're in that situation where you have that workshop or what have you, and the person is doing it, are you sitting in the back of the workshop? Are you coaching them before and after? Like, how is that going for you?
I remember one of the mentees I had, I remember him giving his very first talk. And I remember he gave me his slide deck, and he was more of a senior engineer, but maybe new to public speaking, right? So I think the same kind of fears come up as well. And I remember giving him some advice of like, look, be yourself. That's too many slides, et cetera, et cetera. And then just being in the audience in the front row so he could look at me. And every time he was looking for a reassurance, I would be there and like give him that thumbs up and just kind of nod my head or frown. It's like, if I didn't like it, I didn't like it. But give him those kind of visual cues to help him boost the confidence. And I just saw his confidence take off after about 6 minutes. He was just on cloud 9 and he wrote it. And people came up to him, asked him all these questions. He felt really good. Then afterwards, I kind of circled back and say, look, everyone can improve something. Maybe I gave him a little bit of advice, but yeah, I think being there in the same room a little bit and then having that fast follow to say, hey, I noticed you got caught off guard with this question. How would you think you would go about researching it? How would you be stronger next time? That seems to go a long way for people that are still kind of learning.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, especially like I think for anybody who's given a conference talk, whether you've given one at scale or like a meetup or whatever, the person who's in the row who's actually paying attention and clapping along with you makes the whole thing worthwhile and actually can be a huge, person to make you keep going and make you still feel like you can keep going through the whole thing. So that's a great thing.
I'm going to reverse this really quick. So we talk about this from the engineering lens. At Google, I got promoted to, let's say, a director level. You're executive, you sponsor some accounts, you're expected to pair with CTOs of Fortune 500s. The thing I learned really quickly that I was also new to how to talk and speak to the C-suite, right? These are people who have bigger problems than the version of Go or the performance of some library. And I found myself as a fish out of water for a little while until I learned some new techniques of how to maybe speak at a high level while still offering value, how to keep the same aspects of entertainment and excitement and grabbing people's attention. And I found myself reviewing earnings reports and listening to earnings calls and looking at their HR hiring list just so I could actually tell a different story than I gave to the engineering community, because it turned out some of those you have to almost change the mind of the leadership before you can actually advocate for those developers. And I caught myself as a fish out of water. And so I guess in a senior role, you find yourself being the junior in the room if you don't know how to switch for that particular audience. I don't know if others have that same kind of experience.
Yeah.
Kelsey, that is so good. Kelsey is one of the people I reached out to when I was thinking about going into developer advocacy. I guess he hadn't had that knowledge yet because he didn't prep me for that part, Kelsey. But I was like, all of a sudden, found myself like in situations where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we need you to give a talk, but exactly that. It's not to engineers anymore. It's to like this board of directors at this company, and we need to close a deal there. So you got to kill it. And I'm like, what? I don't think they want to see my Java demo. So it's really difficult to switch to that and understand it. I had to get help from like my C-suite at my company and ask them for points that I should touch on and what would be relevant to these folks.
I've even seen the title developer advocate or director of developer relations count against you, right? It's like, oh wow, why is this person here? What this person's out of scope. So I've seen that also just start things off the wrong way.
I think the first time that I presented in front of a board, I think I got better at it over time because I didn't understand the context that they don't necessarily understand. If you're just talking about metrics, which a lot of like speaking at that level to those types of, C-suites, you're kind of thinking through just metrics, input, output, and those types of functions. You're not really giving context to what you already know intrinsically. Like all of us on this call probably intrinsically know some things about our communities that we don't even really think about, right? Like the adoption of a certain framework or how, containers have taken off and things like that, that other people who are investors or C-suites might not actually know about. So when I started giving better talks to them, what I found was just giving them some of the problem space and the context really helped a lot because all of the metrics all of a sudden made sense. It's like, well, this is the thing that we're pursuing because of X, and you may not know this, but here's some background in this, and that's why this project is important. Because sometimes you kind of assume everybody knows what you know in that space, and they're thinking about other things, right? They're thinking about spaces that you don't have a lot of context to. So that's where that Angie learning thing really comes in handy. But I found that if you can explain the problem and then the solution, that can really help with those types of calls.
This is all making me think that so much of developer relations and advocacy is about connecting with people and finding common ground and finding ways to bond with people. And I think tailoring your message to the audience, whether that's, developers or CTOs, that's what you really need to learn to excel at.
So I think it's a good time to transition. I also want to be respectful of all your time. I know it's at the top of the hour, so I have a ton to ask if you all still have time to hang on, but I want to at least get in some questions from the audience. So the first one is from Sarah on Twitter that reached out to Angie. And I think this is especially important with everybody's pretty much remote right now. But their question was, how isolating is DevRel work? And I know that probably depends on the team, but kind of their point is kind of like a freelance role where you're kind of on your own, and maybe you have a larger DevRel team. Does anybody want to touch on that?
I can start. I joined a company in Auth0 about a year ago that had been remote first since its founding. And I forget what the numbers are, but like 60% of people worked remotely full time before COVID. So I think in that sense, as a company, culturally, we were ready to do that sort of stuff. But I think as our team is spread out across the world, and there's 6 or 7 of us right now, I think we've learned to work really well together and collaborate on videos and live streams and that kind of stuff. And we're always trying to do more. But I definitely don't feel isolated from my team in that sense. There's certainly struggles like time zone wise when you work with people all across the world and you only have like a certain amount of hours to be able to communicate. But one of the things that I think is the most special in DevRel, I mentioned this earlier, like bringing people on for a stream, being able to reach out to like literal strangers on the internet and say, hey, that stuff's really cool. Would you be willing to come and tell me about it? But then also, I feel like I almost relate this back to like when I was in college as a freshman. Like it's totally understandable for you to go up to almost anyone and say, hey, I'm a freshman. What's your name? Right? Like it's an easy intro thing. I feel like it's the same way and more so in developer relations because I can do those things where I ask people to come on stream for something random. But I also have a reason now to reach out to other people at different companies, learn more about their products, build relationships with that person, build relationships with that company. And that to me is much more whatever the opposite of isolating is than it would be even like going into an office every day. Because I feel like in so many ways my network or just my friendships is that much more limitless than it would be if I was in an office by a team of 6. Because you kind of fall into that rut almost of like that's your team and that's who you talk to and that's who you see. But now I look at like I have a reason to go and just reach out to different people. And that I think for me has made it a lot less isolating for me personally.
It's more isolating for me, probably more than any other job I've ever had. You know, when I was doing full-time engineering, I'm constantly doing code reviews. I'm constantly working in some area asking who the hell would write code like this? Probably me. And I had a common goal around the thing I was working on or building. And every day, that common goal didn't change as much. Being in developer relations or for the first time, I find myself, and it could just be the nature of the role, it could be the nature of my impact and influence, but I find myself working more with, product leaders that are making product decisions. So my advocacy work has a big feedback loop that goes out into the world, into the community, into the customer. And when I see the themes and synthesize those themes, I tend to engage with the product leaders to make sure that we can have the roadmap reflecting the needs of the community. Working with the team lead to instill empathy. So running things like empathy workshops, giving engineers the chance to feel like our customers feel so that they can go off and build products for the people I'm advocating for. So I wouldn't say that I'm alone and just writing blog posts and things like that by myself. But I do feel like this is the first role where it's less about working with people who also do DevRel than it is working with the people I'm advocating for and then the people that are working on their products or selling the products and having them complete the loop. So, and again, it could just be where I am in my career, but I found that as my experience so far.
Yeah, I have felt the highest highs in this role and the lowest lows. Like I felt the loneliest I've felt in tech in this role. And I don't think it's correlated with the size of the team. You know, I'm coming off of Microsoft. It's one of the largest developer relations teams in the industry. And I felt my loneliest while I was on that team. So I don't think it's any kind of guarantee. But I have felt increasingly that people separate some of us from the community because I don't know, maybe it's like intimidation or whatever. But I am very much a human being. I need reassurance and love and all of that and connection, just like anyone else. And so I think I speak for all of us when it's like, if I'm in a space, please don't ever hesitate to come up to me. I am literally just a member of the community.
I found that a lot of times people in different parts of the business don't necessarily understand what it is that we do or the value that we're bringing in. For example, none of us, I think, only speak on our products, right? So if you look at this, let's say pandemic, all right, it would be easy for someone in another department to say, now, why are we paying this woman all this money to go globe trotting across the world and she doesn't even mention our product at the event, right? So it's really hard for people to see the bigger picture. What I found is that my manager fortunately gets it. Like, he gets it. And he then shares that with the broader organization. And he's able to say, like, okay, look at these things that Angie has done, and this is the business value, where it might not seem very obvious that this helps the business, something that I'm doing, but he'll go ahead and paint that picture, and that's been helpful for me.
Cool. Anil reached out and had a question. Anil, did you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in real quick. First of all, I'm a fan of all yours, and this has been an incredible conversation. So thanks everybody for that. The question I had was about sort of resources, because I feel like when I was in engineering, it's like kind of what the team needs, they're going to get. When you're in marketing, it's like, oh, the marketing stack, we're going to sign up for this, and there's this tool, and it just costs what it costs. And then everything in DevRel was like, unless you're asking for T-shirts and stickers, like, can I pretty please have some resources? I feel like is the standard default of like you're always starting from nothing, almost to what Angie was just saying. So I'm curious if folks, one, if that's everybody else's experience, and two, how do we solve that across for everybody who has that problem?
Yeah, I worked early on to flip that. When I work with the different VPs and product leads, I always want to know what their OKRs are, and eventually you're going to find the revenue line. And when you have ideas that demonstrate how to either grow adoption, number of users went from 1 million to 5 million, or revenue went from one number to another number, I find it super easy to get what you want. It's almost like I got to start returning cash, right? You have a startup that's successful, that's like, look, we don't want any more investment at this stage. We're good. We can't even spend what we currently have. So what I tend to find is really trying to figure out prioritization. So I tend to lead with strategy. Like, instead of saying I'm going to write some blogs and do a video, I may say, hey, let me help you devise your go-to-market strategy. Here's where I'm going to contribute to the goals that you have, and it's going to result in these numbers. So I think I've learned to call my shot. When you don't call your shot, meaning you do a blog post and it gets popular, people will just say, it's luck. That's what you do. It's just a blog post. But when you call your shot and you say, when I put this blog post out, it's going to increase the top of the funnel by 300%. And based on our conversion rates, that should translate into this much revenue, publish. And then the whole conversation is different going forward. That's been my experience. And it did take a little bit of learning for me to understand that was the best way to be someone seen as bringing value versus asking for money.
I've also, I agree.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you.
I agree with that. I think I've been fortunate to work under people who do kind of understand those things, but my OKRs have always been more top of funnel metrics, active devs. So seeing how many people, start using a product that your team is working with or working on, or, actively speaking about. And then also the kind of key sign up metrics, which can also be broken down from like very top of the funnel of just like how many people signed up, all the way to like, are people signing up given a certain framework, given a certain build system, things that you're, like speaking on in that moment. So there, you can actually refine it too from there. I had the fortune of working with Lori Voss as a data analyst who's really great and thinking through all of the permutations of this as well. So definitely working with good data analysts who can actually help you think through this like on a more finite manner. But there's also engineering metrics that we were tracking as well, because we were doing some engineering work and trying to figure out those pieces that, work in between the two layers, and like using NPM metrics sometimes to judge whether or not people are adopting those. So I think, to Kelsey's point, all of those things feed into the bottom line. So that all of those things are just tools that you're using to assess, okay, what you need out of this is to make sure that what we're doing is validated. And so those types of OKRs can really help tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also noticed that companies, I think, typically move in a bit of a cyclical manner. And so the pendulum will swing toward long-term bets, and then it'll swing back toward the sort of short-term revenue and calling in money. And so I have found that when a company is focused on long-term bets, they typically invest more in this type of work, because that's essentially what it is. We're investing in communities, we're investing in younger languages and technology groups. And so you can kind of figure out when a company is swinging in that direction. You can kind of ride that wave. And then when they start to contract, I think that's, something to think about as far as individual career trajectories.
So before I continue with any questions, how are all of you doing on time? Because I can definitely keep going, but definitely want to be respectful of your time.
I'm off today.
Okay.
I'm good for another hour or so.
Cool. Okay. Well, the next question we have is from Dahlia. Let me bring her in. Hopefully see that coming up. There we go. Hey, feel free to ask your question. All right. Hey, Dahlia. Well, while we wait, I got a different DM of a question that I can ask. So we have Jonan, who's asking, any advice for helping leadership understand how much control they get over what you tweet?
Woo! This is how you get in trouble.
This is the third rail.
I think what I try to do is explain my authenticity and why it's important. And I've had deals come through Twitter DMs, right? A VP from won't mention company. Hey, Kelsey, follow you on Twitter. I would like to have you come talk to us about XYZ. And I remember 2 weeks later, they reached out to the sales team and said, we want to do business. We want to spend real dollars. And I explained, and I use that example, and there's others, where I don't get that inbound request unless that customer felt comfortable in getting an authentic point of view from me without being part of the sales motion. And you'll see me sometimes, I'll tweet things like, Amazon launched a really cool product. Here's why I think it's dope. And that part is important to me, because if you should know who your competitors are, number one, but your customers are looking at everything. They're trying to figure out what's best for them. And if you want to be able to advocate for them, you should also probably know what their choices are. So if something looks good out there in the marketplace, I think there's a lot you can do in terms of retaining your own credibility. Because if you become, I don't know what the right word is, but if all you do is retweet blog posts that your company tells you to retweet, more than likely, you're probably going to have people that work with you following you on Twitter, and then your impact is greatly reduced. So when I explain that to leadership, would you like me to just be part of the echo chamber, or would you like me to expand into communities where maybe your traditional methods don't reach?
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that, any kind of talk about this internally, like, just if it's one thing to disparage your own company, it's another thing to only talk about your own company. Like, you like, definitely on the disparagement side, then it gets into weird spaces. But like, if you are only speaking about your own company or thinking about your own company, then people really lose. I mean, it goes back to that losing trust thing, right? Like, people don't trust you anymore to be yourself. They think that you're just a shill for the company, and you kind of are. You can't blame them for thinking that. And so that's why people really have to have autonomy to do other things. And I also think, I might be alone in this, but I also think that it's really important that people still be able to moonlight. And what I mean by that is that they still be able to do other things on the side and like be able to make money on other kind of things that interest them on the side, because those things are, first of all, very energizing. Second of all, like allow the person to kind of explore their other interests and not get burnt out in just one space.
Going back to talking about just your product, I think there's also, in terms of, we've touched on this several times, I think that trust of how you talk about your products. Like if I go and ask someone a question about anything, it doesn't have to be a tech product or anything specific, just anything at all. If their interpretation of that thing, whatever it is it's 100% perfect and there's no downsides, that's probably not a conversation that I'm going to continue with, right? Like I just don't trust that, because that doesn't happen. There's no thing out there that's perfect and has no downsides for you to consider. So if I get a pitch, for lack of a better word, that's like that, I'm probably out on that conversation, and that's not the person I trust to actually help me. And it doesn't mean, especially you talk bad about a company, that's not at all what it is, but you're realistic with people, especially in one-on-one scenarios and conversations where they're asking for, I need to solve this problem. I've had conversations where I say, well, like, Allseer could help you do that, but for that specific thing, you might be better off somewhere else, right? And that's the kind of relationship I think that means so much more when you're then that trusted person. There's no telling what the follow-up conversation is. There's no telling what that next conversation is. But most importantly, those are the people, if they trust you, they tell other people that they trust you. And one of my favorite examples, I was asking just on Twitter about headless CMSs about a year ago, and got so many different options, and I was looking at pricing and I was looking at all these different things, and someone from Sanity.io commented and gave me some things, then sent me a DM and said, here's some references. If you have any other questions, like, let me know. And then a person from their DevRel ended up coming on stream with me to help me do that. Like, that's the kind of relationship that I'm now advocating all the time, not having a formal relationship with Sanity, but knowing that those are real people, not that other people at other companies aren't, but knowing those real people and that relationship, I'm going to go and tell other people how amazing they are. So I think that genuineness, that honesty, I think is super, super important. I've never struggled. I've never been like called out and been told to change the way I have those conversations. So I don't know what it's like to have to advocate for that. But I certainly would, because I think that's one of the most important things we can do.
Before we try to go back to Dahlia, Jonan, did you want to follow up on any of that?
Yeah, I was maybe looking for a little more controversial direction, I guess. I know that many of you found yourself in leadership positions and almost certainly have been contacted by someone in an executive role to discuss one of the team members' tweets or a blog post, or, hey, they decided this solution was better than this solution. Turns out that one turns out to be a customer of ours. With regard to that executive audience, how do you navigate those situations? Because I've heard this described to me as, well, your social media is kind of a gray area as to whether it's yours or not. I don't feel so much like it's a gray area. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Boy. I mean, now we get back to the human part, right? Because I think some of these conversations, depending on how they're approached, how people feel at the time, you just get different results and answers. I do think it's one of these things where most of this stuff gets connected, right? It turns out that, in Google, it turns out that so many people are competing with each other, and they're also our customers, that me liking something from, hey, I bought this awesome thing at Home Depot, you can imagine someone else saying, hey, we're a customer too. Why don't you like our thing? And I think that part is just where we got to figure out what those boundaries are. I cannot necessarily be held. I have to promote every customer equally or just lose my voice entirely. I think some companies try to write it down, but everyone that I've ever read that has been written down feels like you almost have to attach a legal disclaimer to your profile, right? Like, these tweets are my own and Google shall not be held liable if it doesn't rain on Wednesday, but it rains on Thursday. It's like, whoa. Once people see that, they also get turned off that you may not be able to speak on your own behalf. So I would say you hire all these great people because of who they are. And if you do all of this work to undermine that, what are you actually getting in the long run? That's the foundation of the conversation. I think, to Sarah's point, I don't think it's appropriate to go online and bash your employer to hell and back and still expect them to pay you, right? There's consequences with that. And I can see where people would get a little bit pissed off if you don't go to them first. I've seen that personally, where people would drag their team before engaging with that team. I think there's a bit of professional courtesy to kind of, give feedback to your team. And I've given feedback to other teams, maybe before I approach something with a negative lens. So I just think it's a really tricky area, but that's the foundation of the conversation for me.
Cool. Thanks. Dahlia, do you want to try to give it another shot? Bummer. Unfortunately, if you want to DM me your question, I'd be happy to ask it on your behalf. So another question that I've been seeing a lot in my DMs is getting into DevRel. So like things like entry-level positions or even internships people were talking about. I know we kind of briefly touched on it before, but generally, what are people's advice for trying to get started?
I mean, this is general advice for any role, but for me, it's, do at least parts of the job before you try and actually get the job. And so, you never want to be put in a role and then feel like you're flailing. So do aspects of it. So write blog posts, speak at conferences or meetups or whatever. Start to really get involved in your community, contribute to open source, whatever avenue suits you best. But really start to be involved. And I think that's the easiest sort of slide into a developer relations role.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I was already writing blog posts. I was already speaking at conferences and stuff like that. I actually put it on my resume. I didn't have a company name to put on top, and I didn't care. I didn't put a company name. I just said, okay, from this time to this time, here are like some developer relations types activities I was doing. And I listed all of that stuff there. So my very first developer role, developer relations role, was actually a senior role, right? I didn't come in as a new developer advocate because I was already doing that job. And that's hard to see, like, when you're that person, you're not the decision maker. Kelsey helped me see that too. When I talked to him, he like hyped me up and let me know like I was already doing this stuff. So that helped me believe that I could do it professionally and land a role in the space. But yeah, I totally agree with that, Emily. Doing it before, even doing it to make sure like it's something you want to do, right? You don't want to get into a role like a lot of people look at this as like such this glamorous role, and oh, y'all are traveling all the time and you'll see me and Sarah on the beach without cocktails and stuff, and it looks like, oh yeah, I want to you're like, I want a job like that. But there's a lot that goes into it, so doing it in advance to make sure that this is something you actually like is highly recommended. Also, I tell people who are looking to get into it, don't just jump on like the first opportunity or anyone who will give you an opportunity. Like, while you are advocating for developers, you also need to be able to like teach and speak about your company and its products. And if you don't like those products, or you don't believe in them or anything like that, it shows. You're not going to do a good job. You're going to be miserable. No one's going to believe you because you're not being authentic. You're just writing a blog post about a particular technology. Versus when I talk about my company's product, Twitter explodes. People are like, this is the best talk of the conference, where it really could be considered like a sales pitch, really. But it's not, because it's something that I'm really genuinely like. I know that it solves a particular problem for users. I'm able to articulate that, and therefore it resonates with people.
Yeah, as always, Angie is completely spot on. I mean, when you're going into developer relations, like what Emily's saying is true, like you should try doing some aspects of the job first. What Angie's saying is true, that it should definitely be a product that you feel passionate about, because people can tell the difference. And you will also tell the difference over a long period of time. You might be able to do a couple of demos here and there at first, but in order to stay at that company for a long time, it has to be something that you really personally believe in too. I think another aspect of it also is just, that empathy piece that we talked about in the beginning is a really big piece of it. If you're going into developer relations or developer advocacy because of that stage or scale aspect where you're like, oh, look at how fancy, that's actually not the job, right? Like the job is to have empathy for the people who are around you and the users that of the product and the developers out there and want to make their journey a lot better. So the impetus really should be more geared out, right? More geared towards like, I want to write the article that I wish I had when I was learning the thing. And that's going to probably be pretty core to your experience if you're going to have a good time in that field or not.
My advice to a lot of people is you don't necessarily have to switch. If you're a developer, one of your superpowers can be taking a lot of skills that you see people in a full-time developer relations role exercise and use. And I'll give you an example. When the Go programming language came out, Rob Pike is one of the creators of the language, and he has a long history in the Unix community. And I didn't know Rob Pike was working on this thing. I didn't even know what Go was until I saw him speak about it, right? He gave a presentation. Here's a brand new programming language from Google. We built it for these reasons. He talked about his experience as a developer at Google, writing code in C and C++, and waiting for long compile times. And that was something I could resonate with because no one wants to wait for their app to build for a long time. And he said, this is why we wrote Go. And to me, that was a bit of the same qualities we expect in people who get to do this full time. So even if you can't do it full time, you can start leveraging the same set of skills. If you built the library, maybe you write some docs or a tutorial on how to use the library. If you're a full-time engineer, wouldn't it be amazing to make a small video on how to actually use your particular API? Maybe you can set up a community around the thing that you're working on, even if that's just internally. And I think if you leverage those skills in your role, you might actually see that people will see you as a more valuable engineer. So I don't know if you really have to switch to get the full benefits. And to be honest, to Angie's point, doing this full time, sometimes you wish you had a break, right? Sometimes you wish you can just take 3 months off from giving talks and just work on a project more long term and then get back out there. So this is why sometimes I'll have periods where I don't want to talk about anything. I'm in the process of building and learning something new. I don't have anything I want to talk about right now. And you see this with artists. They don't want to make a new song until they live a little bit more. And then they can go do a follow-up album because they put their heart and soul in the previous one. So it's not just a role, it's a thing that you can do in terms of a set of skills that you can apply anywhere.
Awesome. So going back to Dahlia quick. So unfortunately we weren't able to get the audio working, but our question was going to Emily's comment about the lowest lows. How do you all take care of your mental health in this role? And I feel like this is incredibly important, not just now, but always.
I'm going to say things, but I need everyone to understand that this is still like, I'm not an expert in, my own mental health. I'm ongoing. But I mean, I think it's just learning when you're beginning to touch burnout. And it happens, right? This job is a lot harder than it looks. There's a lot of things you don't see on Twitter, right? So yes, like Angie was saying, like you're seeing us on beaches drinking cocktails. What you're not seeing is me getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get a flight, or missing time with my kid, or practicing 3 times ahead of time, or making sure that a demo can be built and tore down by other people. And so there's all these components that go to a relatively short performance, if you want to look at it like that. And it's exhausting. I mean, it is absolutely exhausting. I love it. It fills my soul. But I have had to learn and am learning how to kind of pick up on when I'm starting to burn out. Ashley McNamara is on this call and she has this amazing talk and I think blog post on this. But we careen toward burnout constantly, and knowing when to stop and knowing that we're human beings that deserve breaks and rest is important.
Yeah, 100%. I think learning to say no is a big piece of this, and it sounds silly, but it's actually was much harder for me than I care to admit, because I'm naturally a person who will just be like, okay, sure, with anything. I clumsily tried to talk about it before, but having some harassment that you can experience when you're at scale and on stage definitely plays does a toll on your mental health. Like it really starts to make you feel, even if like in your heart that like Nazis aren't right or whatever, like it can still really take a toll on the way that you feel. So I personally do have like a therapist that I go to who helps kind of balance me and check in with facts and make sure that I'm, thinking through things in a kind of sane way and stuff. Maybe sane is the wrong word for it, but I think it was a little bit tougher in some regards. Like maybe it's different types of toughness. When we were on the road all the time, there was a levity to being on the road because we got to hang out together and have these moments of relief, but all of the travel was really rough on our bodies, or at least on mine. And not seeing our families for a while was also kind of tough. And then the alternate of that in the pandemic is not having that human connection, right? Like giving a speech to thousands of people and then just getting off the call and feeling like, okay, I guess I'll make a microwave quesadilla now. Like
Air
not
fryer,
having
Sarah, air fryer.
Yeah, well, Angie sent me an air fryer. I'm too lazy to use it the way I should. But yeah, I think you do actually have to care for your mental health in a way. You always do. Like you have to as an engineer, you have to as any kind of worker, especially in a pandemic. But sometimes the scale aspect for me at least was really tough in the parts of saying no and the parts of getting some feedback that was like about, not great things like harassment type things.
Yeah, right before the pandemic. So pandemic hit like last March in the US, right? So February, that month, I spent a total of 6 days at home. And every other day was running across the globe to all these different events. And that's really hard. Like it's hard. You're away from your family, your support system, the travel, the airports, the different cities and countries. Like everything is just a lot. Not only that, you end up somewhere and you have to put your game face on. Like you have to get on stage. People paid to come and hear, you at this event. You can't get up there sad. I mean, there's so much crap going on in the world. All of that's in the back of your mind, and you have to get up and give your absolute best. It's really difficult for mental health. And as awful as the pandemic has been, I've been grateful for the time to just kind of sit down for a moment. Other than that, I don't really have any other. I'm awful, I think, at self-care. So I don't really have any tips or anything about how to manage this. Y'all look out for me. Make sure I'm taking care of myself.
I started blocking my calendar. So my calendar has lunch. Like there's an hour meeting called lunch. You can't book me during lunch. And then usually there's a certain time, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock for the rest of the day that says like to do work, like actual work. And, not to do too many meetings. And I also pivoted away from, you've always wondered like how, when an artist, like when they say an artist falls off, right? You love their artwork, you love their music, you love their books, and then they go missing. And I think for a lot of us, at least for me, you're trying to be as good as your last talk. Because people typically say, oh, that was so amazing. I like this part. I like that part. I can't wait for the next one. Now, they hear compliments. I hear pressure and anxiety like, wow, I have no idea how I'm going to top that. And that's a lot of self-inflicted kind of stress. But I do know that a lot of people will say, oh, man, you got to catch Kelsey if he's going to speak. And so now what I've done consciously is just try to limit the number of times that I got to go and try to create some amazing thing, especially when it comes to a live demo. That's stressful for me in particular. And so I pivoted more towards fireside chats where I can just be me. Sometimes I just want to tell stories or reflect back on things and just be the human, not just the person who cooks up another cool live demo that's impressive, or even though they have the potential to inspire. So one thing I've done is just understand when I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm stressing out way too much, and then just pivot. And I think having the courage to pivot has been the most rewarding thing that I've been able to do, because you can't be the Kubernetes person forever. Before then, I was the Puppet person. I was the CoreOS person. And so I just decided to take back just to be Kelsey, be the person. And then I just dibble and dabble in things that I'm interested in.
One of the things that
Oh, you go ahead, James.
Sorry, Colby. Yeah. Real quick, one of the things I'm looking forward to leveraging is I think we've proven in the past year that we can still drive impact remotely. So like a constant or a theme that I think we just heard from several different people is travel, and travel is tough. The time it takes, being away from your family, being out of your routines and that sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to being able to advocate for myself to say, hey, we've proven that like YouTube videos or live streams can be really helpful for us. If I feel like I'm getting to one of those points, I think it's more than reasonable for me to say I want to spend 2 months at home and I want to focus on online content, an alternative way to still make an impact and get some of that rest that I think we're all looking for. So I think we have like a unique ability to advocate for that kind of stuff in the near future based on some of the things that we've all collectively done in the last year.
I know something that I learned from my last job with generally working remotely is Slack has a feature where you can disable or snooze notifications outside of work hours. And that feature alone just reduced my anxiety so much by not getting those pings on my phone. It's a complete game changer. But unless anybody has anything else, Lori, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I know this comes up a lot on Twitter, and it's come up even in this conversation, which is the idea that DevRel as a job is like 10 jobs at once. It's content creation, it's marketing, it's social media, it can be sales, it can be roadmap and product and all of those things. But that's all based on the engineering skills and knowledge that you all have. So I'm curious how you find time for that when there are 5 million other things vying for your attention, all of which are part of your job description.
Strategy. Internally, I was working on Go support for our Cloud Functions product. So I started to get into the serverless world, and I decided to I need to go back and write some code. So made some small contributions in our internal repositories that implement these various runtimes. And during that process, again, I put on my strategy hat and say, I'm adding functionality, so that checks the engineering checkbox. Once it's added, I'm learning about serverless and the trade-offs that you make. Scale to 0, 0 to 1 is very different than scaling horizontally. And I'm no expert, but I decided to share that why I'm learning. So Twitter for me was the right tool to learn in public. And now we want to launch the product, right? We're going to announce Go support at some point. And again, part of my go-to-market strategy then is I don't want to just do those activities for the sake of doing them. But in part of the launching of this product, so number one, you help build it. Number two, you help advocate that it should even be built. Number three, you go on things like social media to explain what you're learning while you're learning. And I had a keynote at GopherCon, which is a big conference for Go developers. And during that keynote, I was going to talk about serverless for the Go programming language. And the bet that I had with the team, or the deal that I had with the team, was if our product is ready, we can launch it at GopherCon. But if it's not, then I'll be forced to use Amazon's Lambda on stage instead. And that's very motivating to the team to get it to that alpha and get the docs ready. But I noticed that in that whole strategy for that quarter, I picked all the related activities that made sense for the thing that I was currently working on. So that's how I balance it all. It's just this unique skill that we have that we can go from planning, strategy, product, implementing, and then roll out, and then having that feedback loop of how do we make it better now that it's launched. So that's how I go about leveraging all of those skills.
Yeah, and also I mean, Kelsey is absolutely right. Strategy is huge. It's everything. I think having a team, if you do, and having people, playing to different people's strengths on that team can also be really helpful. There are some people who are naturally really geared towards the kind of pre-sales pieces. There are some people who really love the engineering work. There are some people who really love, making demos and making weird jokes that have poop in them, Cassidy. And and I think if you can play to everybody's strength there, that can also be really helpful. So you don't necessarily have to do everything yourself. If you're at a smaller startup, of course, probably you do. But if you're at a larger startup, you can start to see those patterns.
I think I've also discovered that I have a natural sort of ebb and flow. So I used to fight it, but now I just kind of accept that I will have 6 months of just a sprint and I will accomplish ridiculous amounts of things. And then I just kind of crash and burn and I just turn into a bit of a slug for a period of time. And that's okay because it's just my rhythm. So just kind of learning to accept yourself and recognizing that there are limitations to just how much a single human can do.
I will say developer relations often doesn't fit. When I started at Microsoft in evangelism, we were under the sales org and we went to this big sales conference and I had no idea what they were talking about. Like, it's just not a language that I spoke. And then just recently, I got involved in a marketing strategy conversation for our Q2. And I literally, every 5 seconds, I was like, I'm so sorry. Can you just tell me what that means? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. And eventually, like after that, I had a separate follow-up call to again say, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Like, I'm trying to take this as a learning opportunity. I'm just totally lost. This acronym, this thing. And I think one of the things that's been two things that have been most beneficial in that is becoming comfortable with yourself to know how and when to say I don't know and to ask for help. And that's really tough, especially for people that are new in any industry. And then secondly, having people to talk to on different teams, from the product team, from the engineering team, from marketing teams. If you have those people that you can reach out to and have more detailed conversations to help fill in some of those gaps, those are the things that have really helped me a lot. But it is like the two roles that I've been in this area, they just never quite felt like we really fit in. And that's kind of, it's honestly a struggle, but it is also a learning opportunity. There's just a lot of other things to be aware of and knowledgeable about. So having people that you can talk to and trust and ask questions and feeling comfortable with yourself and asking those questions and raising them, I think is really important.
Cool. So the next question, what are some critical qualities that you need to succeed in this role?
I don't know. For me, I would probably say, for me, a lot of the success is actually caring about people in general, as cheesy as that sounds. So if I'm in a room and someone wants to deprecate an API, and I know that there are real people that I can mention by name, I can even see their face and say, if you deprecate that API, this person's going to have a bad time. And remember, when we talk about advocacy, you got to ask yourself, who are you advocating for? If you're advocating for your company and their products, then maybe you feel slightly different about that. But when you're advocating for the customer, a lot of times you're going to be at odds with people internally. You may say, hey, that price point is way too high. I know that enterprises will pay for it, but the free tiers require from my community. There are people who could never pay that kind of price, and you're going to shut them out of this technology. And I'm advocating for them too. So who do we need to talk to? How do we meet somewhere in the middle about what that free tier needs to look like? So I think you got to ask yourself a question: who are you advocating for? And depending on who you identify with, are you willing to be a true advocate? And sometimes I think this is where a lot of this discussion around, sometimes it does help to be a developer, to be able to articulate the needs of a developer. Or sometimes you may have experience of being a poor developer or a developer without a very powerful laptop. And you may push back when the team tries to raise the system requirements because you have empathy and experience from that community. So I think that is going to be, to me, that helped me be really successful, is really understand what advocacy means and who you're advocating for, and go all out for them.
I really love that. I was going to say very similarly, I think a superpower in developer advocacy is being able to see the best in someone. So whether that's just kind of getting to where you think they want to go. I mean, people are awkward and weird and they say weird things. And so being able to kind of put aside things like ego or phrasing or whatever and get to, okay, where is the heart, the spirit of this question or comment or whatever. But also seeing where someone can go. You know, my favorite thing is seeing someone's potential before they see it themselves, and really kind of focusing on, okay, here's, you know, this is what you're interested in. This is where I think you could go. And, you know, not only helping them logistically, but also, you know, being inspiring. I was thinking this morning, this goes for all of us, not the speakers, everyone on this call. You are someone's hero. Like, you inspire someone by simply existing. And I think if we all sort of focused on that, we would have a real magical culture.
So in addition to tech skills, and I'm saying this as tech girl, right? So I've branded myself as this technical persona. In addition to that, I don't think I would be successful at all without good communication skills as well. Like, I feel like that is just a must-have for developer advocates, right? It's about communicating technical concepts to audiences of like varying experience levels, right? Communicating to different audiences, as Kelsey mentioned earlier. So business folks who don't have this technical background. So being able to communicate, and that doesn't mean verbally, it could also mean like written communication or whatever format, but you need to be able to communicate to your audience, no matter what that audience looks like. I would also say like creativity and curiosity are also really nice to have traits for developer advocates. So, you know, the job is, there's only so much you can write about a particular API or a particular feature. Like, you have to explore, learn new things, learn, you know, how to integrate this with other things, how to solve interesting problems that, you know, may be useful for your community. All of those things help make the job fun. So being curious and creative in how you position that is really helpful.
Yeah, Angie, I actually wouldn't have thought to say creativity, but that's such a great one. And it actually is kind of connected to the communication part, right? Like, if you have creativity in looking at these things, then sometimes you can find ways to connect with people, even on a really, you know, dry subject matter. Like, you can take something that other people just wouldn't find engaging. We've already seen, like, through a lot of studies that you know, emotions attached to the limbic system and makes things easier to recall. So the more you kind of connect with people's emotions and do something that really engages them while you're teaching them, they're actually going to learn what you're saying a little bit better. So when Angie's talking about that creativity piece, if you're going to talk about one product for a while and find all of these different ways to engage with the audience, not only is it creative in terms of like playing with the tech, it's creative in terms of ways of communicating that tech. Like, Angie has this great speech where she starts off with like a murder mystery. I mean, there are very few people who would go like, okay, let's do a talk on testing. We're going to do, you know, a murder mystery. I think that's an incredible thing. That's the reason why people are, you know, outpouring on Twitter later that they loved her speech and they don't feel like it's like a sales call or something when she's talking.
Cool. Nacho, looks like you're up next. Did you want to ask your question?
Hey, nice. Thank you for accepting me. I just started this week a new position as a developer advocate, so I'm super interested in this talk, and it's been very amazing to hear you all talk. Yeah, so my question would be just when you're integrating so much your online presence and your what you write about, what you talk about with your company values, stuff like that, how do you separate, right, and like work from personal brand growth? Because for me, it seems like it's very blurred one with the other, right? Because I'm still growing my brand on my job, and I still like thinking about ways of improving the company's brand when I'm on off the clock, right?
This one's super hard, and I think if I think back now, this is the thing I probably take for granted the most. Where I work in my division with my team, they allow me to be me. I remember in some of the recruiting dinners, my biggest pushback was, I don't want to be 1 in 100,000. I don't want to go be put in a box. I don't want to figure out how to conform to the HR title. I just wasn't interested in that. And so I'm lucky that the technologies were the technologies I was interested in before joining the company. So personally, I feel like I can be authentic because some of these things I would be using regardless of where I was working. So every once in a while, you'll have a point in your career where those things will align. And it turns out also that who I want to be as a person, I have permission to do so. And the reason why I use permission, I've seen people say, wow, Google will let you say that. I remember the first time I embraced this situation, I was maybe talking at a DevOps Days event. And I don't know, I was scheduled to give a technical talk, and I made a pivot. And I just wrote about my journey into tech. And I remember for some reason, it didn't work out that way when I wrote it, but I look out and Ashley was there, and she's in one of the rows, and she's crying because I'm crying. And we're on this emotional roller coaster. And I get off the stage, and it felt different. At that point, I felt that I was no longer hiding behind the live demo. I was no longer hiding behind the tech. People finally got to see this person they call Kelsey. And it felt very different because after that situation, I kind of felt that I had finally given myself permission to be who I wanted to be. And so far, it's working out fine. And the reason why I'm saying that I'm fortunate for that, because I know that doesn't work at every company. I know some people will sit you down and say, hey, keep your personal life separate. Focus on the tech. Use the deck we gave you. We want to see what you're going to say word by word and get it approved by legal and marketing before you say it. And so for those situations, it's very unfortunate because I think what you're doing is you're taking the very best of people and trying to normalize it. And so for me, that's how I did it. So it took a little while, but I think it's up to the company to give people the space and permission to do so. And then I think it's also up to you to take advantage of that when the time comes.
Okay, that was super amazing story. Thank you for sharing, Kelsey.
Did anybody want to touch on that before we continue?
I feel like Kelsey nailed it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, nobody can follow that up,
Mic drop, basically. So, all right, this is a last question. Thank you, everybody, for who submitted questions or requested, but we have only time. We'll just ask one more. And this is for everybody. We can kind of go down the line just like we did with the intro. What's next for all of you, and kind of what do you see in the future of DevRel? And I'll just go by the order in my app again. Angie, if you want to start.
I don't want to start. Somebody else start.
Okay, how about I start in reverse? Kelsey, do you want to start?
The future of DevRel?
Yeah, what's next for you, the future of DevRel, either or both?
I think the thing that I've been so amazed about is watching all the new people, the career switchers, learn how to take the skills that they see us demonstrate. I'm watching new people say, hey, I'm learning Java. Let me start my channel. And they just bring in all of this energy and creativity because you know what? They don't know what the rules are, so they get to break them. To me, the future of DevRel will be giving engineers a permission that they can be who they want to be. And we're giving people more personalities to take inspiration from. The only personalities I had were, back in my day, they were like, hey, you would just be in some basement staring at a screen all day. That was the thing you could aspire to. And that's just not true. And I think seeing all these faces, so I think DevRel is just going to be a set of skills, just like testing used to be a unique profession. It is now part of everyone's skill set, or should be. And I think DevRel is going to be one of those things that no matter what type of role you play in tech, you'll start to see some of those skills be incorporated in how you do things.
That's great. James, do you have time to answer quick? I know you're on your way out.
Yeah. I get like I don't have a crystal ball or anything for what the future of DevRel is, but I will tell you what I think the implication of the growth of DevRel will be. And I think that the growth is probably pretty evident. More and more companies are having DevRel teams. More and more companies are creating DevRel teams earlier on in their process. And I think what's most exciting for me in that is the fact that when people graduate from college or go through a boot camp or self-teach or whatever journey they take to try to get into tech, they see more options. When I was applying for jobs, I have a computer science degree. I was applying for jobs and doing interviews. It was all just like you become a developer and you write code 8 hours a day, right? Like that was just what I kind of expected. I had no idea that this technical evangelist role at Microsoft existed. I'd never heard of that, and I laughed at it the first time I heard it. Most people have. So I think the implication of the growth of developer advocacy and DevRel is just there's more opportunities for people to embrace those other skill sets that a lot of us have talked about, like being able to combine my enjoyment for being around people and for teaching people while also being super technical is that perfect combination for me. And it's a thing that just didn't exist or most people weren't aware of 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So I think just that implication of now more people find different ways to transition into a career or get into a career they want while also embracing their particular interests and skill sets. That's the thing that I think more doors are going to be opened by DevRel continuing to grow and its awareness along the way.
Awesome. Emily, you want to go next?
Yeah. I think DevRel is at a really interesting kind of decision, like a pivotal point in its history. And I'm hoping that we come out of this, the COVID restrictions and all of that by empowering people to sort of lean into their natural power. I think over the last couple of years, we've over-indexed on conferences and speaking and being up on stage. And that's just like the sort of the gold medal of DevRel, and it's not everyone wants to be up on a stage. And by the way, very few people can actually go to conferences. And so, whatever your superpower is, lean into that, whether you're in an official DevRel role or not. My next role is not technically DevRel. That does not mean that I won't be doing Emily, it's part of who I am. But yeah, I'm hoping that this sort of contraction can bring new people into the industry, can have people really feel comfortable with their strengths and just leaning into that.
Cool. Sarah?
Yeah, these are all really great answers. My hope for DevRel is that it really is seen just like how design was kind of at first like this is how something looks, and then kind of expanded into branding versus UI versus UX, and then a user journey and research and things like that. I think DevRel will expand in that same area too, where it starts of like, we need to connect to a developer one-to-one, like we should do a blog post, into these kind of areas where you're like, okay, what is the full journey here? It involves documentation, it involves connecting with someone, it involves hearing from somebody about the product more than once in a way that solves their issue. It involves like a tool that they know that they need that never got in their way from start to finish. So I think that there's like a depth and richness to that conversation that we're starting to get into. Previously, it's been kind of like, let's talk to someone. And then, now we're getting into like, how do we really get the community involved back? How do we make sure that the tools that they need are right at their fingertips all the time and that's a smooth process? How do we make sure that, documentation has exactly the right wording to engage with, newcomers and different types of audiences? So I think my hope is that it continues to have a lot of emphasis and empathy for the people that are using the product, and that companies understand that value, because I do think there's a huge amount of value for companies who unlock that. Like, that is a turning point for companies when people really feel like they don't have anything in their way in order to use your product. That does impact the bottom line. So I also hope that the conversation gets to a point where people don't have to keep making that case over and over again. But I think that, if we go in this direction, there's a hugely valuable future for everyone involved.
All right, Angie, you ready?
Yeah. So I think that DevRel, as a profession, is going to gain more respect. So we talked a lot about, people questioning us and stuff like that. That's starting to change, actually. I'm seeing that change before my very eyes. Now people request, like they request to hear from the developer advocate. I don't want to hear from your marketing team. I don't want a demo from your sales folks. Can I talk to the developer advocate, right? Because they know this is going to be someone who, number one, is an engineer, understands their problems. Number two, is going to shoot it to them straight, right? And I think everyone on this panel has agreed that it's community first. Like I said, I work for the community and my employer sponsors that. Sometimes my advice to people is, yeah, you don't want my product. This competitor product is the better solution for you. And that sounds crazy, right? But I work for the community first, and I want you to have a good experience. And that builds trust. People know that I'm not BSing them when I talk to them, and I'm telling them the truth. Companies are starting to get hip to this, right? And they're starting to realize, damn, I need me a developer advocate. We need to start up a space. I see a lot of folks in here who are not necessarily ICs, but they lead a company or they lead the developer relations team or something like that. People are getting hip to this, right? They might not know what it is, but they know, like, wow, I see that person who's a developer advocate. They work for my competitor. My competitor is kicking my ass because of that person. We need somebody now, right? And so I'm starting to see more and more roles open up for this, and not just even at the IC level, but more senior roles integrated into more areas of the business, right? Now at my senior director role, I'm starting to do more across the business, because these other folks, the C-suite, the board of directors and all of this, they see how impactful it is to have someone who actually does this, right? Who actually understands your customers, who understands the space. And now everybody wants to hear my opinions on things before we make business moves, right? So that's what I see as a future of DevRel, just getting, larger, much more respect, much more integrated into other areas of the business.
And that's an amazing way to end this. I just want to thank all of you for being willing to give your time and have this awesome conversation. You all are so inspiring. It's amazing to be amongst you guys up here. So I just really appreciate it. Any last words before we say goodbye?
Thanks, both of you, for hosting. This was great.
This was amazing. I'm so grateful we got to spend this time together as a whole group.
Awesome. Well, I hope you all have a
really good discussion. I just want to thank everyone who came. I know that it's Friday, Good Friday at that. So thank you so much for sparing some time to hang out with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a fabulous weekend, and take care.
Bye.